So, Caregiver Burnout 101. Our agenda today, we're going to define caregiver burnout. We're going to talk about how it's assessed and treated. Then we're going to spend a lot of time in prevention. And then we're going to talk about burnout versus compassion fatigue. And then I'll give you some resources on how you can get some help or some support if you feel that you are experiencing caregiver burnout or close to it. Okay. And sometimes caregiver burnout, it kind of creeps up on us. We don't realize we're there until, I don't want to say too late, because it's never too late, but we don't realize what we're in it until it's a bit more overwhelming than we had originally wanted it to be, right? So we'll go ahead and get into it. What is caregiver burnout? So caregiver burnout is incredibly common, okay? There are millions of caregivers across the nation, and even more so, of course, across the globe. And so this has been studied quite thoroughly. Um, it's about 60% of caregivers um, are affected by burnout, or at least symptoms of burnout, okay? So if you find yourself in some of these slides, please know that it is not something wrong with you, okay, quote unquote. You are not the only one feeling this way, okay? A lot of times we can shame ourselves out of getting help because we feel like, well, I should just be able to push through this. I should be able to get, everything done without it being, overwhelming. But the reality is, this is a very common experience for caregivers across the nation. So please don't feel shame or guilt if you feel that you are encroaching upon burnout or already in the thick of it, okay? It is a challenging reality that many people who are compassionate face, okay? And it can manifest as a deep sense of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion, okay? So it's not just, oh, I'm a little sleepy or I'm a little, overwhelmed. This is a deep, deep fatigue that you can feel on multiple levels, okay? And it arises most often from this immense dedication that you have for your loved one. Okay, you're pouring out love when you manage someone else's healthcare, when you manage their safety, when you manage potentially every aspect of their life. Okay, those are acts of love, absolutely, but they do cost something, right? They do take its toll. They do take their toll on the individual who is performing all of these duties, right? Um, And so if you find yourself feeling tired, stressed, withdrawn, right? Anxious, or even, maybe depressed, right? Please know that these are valid feelings and you are not alone, okay? I'd like you to kind of imagine burnout as a candle that has burned through its wick, right? It simply doesn't have what it needs to continue shining, right? We can't light a candle that has no wick. And so burnout can happen when you feel overwhelmed, when you're trying to carry the weight of responsibility without receiving any support that you need, right? And this can be really, really difficult when you push yourself to do more than you're truly capable of. Okay. So that could be emotionally, physically, financially. And many of you who are caring for people who have a diagnosis where um, it progresses, right? Where you started as a caregiver is not where you find yourself today or where you'll end up. And so the needs of your loved one change and they can become more intense. And so something that was manageable in the beginning, 9 years down the road, you're depleted. You don't have the skill set, the resources, whatever you need to continue to do the job. Um, and that's why it's so important to be very mindful of how we are replenishing ourselves, okay? Because some of you all have jobs that are going to continue to become more intense, okay? And so you cannot expect the same person who started to be the one who finishes it, right? Because you've changed, the needs have changed. And so don't guilt yourself into thinking that, you know, I was okay 3 years ago. Why am I not okay now? Okay, things change and that's all right, okay? So it's important to remember that your health and your well-being, that matters just as much as the persons that you're caring for, right? Recognizing the signs and symptoms of burnout is a really, really important step in getting the help that you deserve, right? The support that you need, especially during the most trying times, okay? And also just remember, you're doing a really, really remarkable job. And your own well-being is essential in order to continue offering that quality care and that love that you give to your loved one. Okay. I've said it a million times. Caring for you is caring for them. Okay. It's the foundation of all that you do. Okay. So, what are the signs and symptoms of caregiver burnout? Okay. Um, the signs and symptoms of caregiver burnout are similar to those of stress and depression. Okay. So this isn't going to be every sign or symptom, okay, but these are the more general ones, okay, that are widely reported throughout the nation. So the first one, emotional and physical exhaustion, okay. We all know what physical exhaustion feels like, but we might not be very clear on what emotional exhaustion feels like. And I would just best describe it if you are struggling to feel empathetic, if you are struggling to be able to identify how you're feeling, okay, those can be signs of physical or of emotional exhaustion, excuse me. But we'll talk about that more later on. Withdrawal from friends, family, and other loved ones, right? You just don't have the bandwidth to socialize, right? You just want to be kind of isolated when you can. You want to withdraw from socializing and being around other people. Maybe you're losing interest in your activities that you used to really get a lot of pleasure from, right? It just seems like a burden or seems like an overwhelm or just seems like it takes too much energy to do things that are fun. Feeling hopeless and helpless. Okay, so this is a big one. When I was a suicide prevention educator, one of the things that we would tell people is that the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness is the one of the major identifiers that somebody who has survived a suicide attempt says that they were feeling prior to. Okay, so if you find yourself feeling hopeless or feeling helpless, please do not ignore that. Okay, because that is a huge red flag when it comes to your mental well-being. Changes in appetite or weight. So this is for maybe more than 2 weeks, and it's different from what you are used to. Okay, so of course there can be changes in appetite and weight because you're intentionally doing these things to either gain or lose weight. Or maybe you're taking a medication that's affecting your appetite. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just kind of this sudden desire or lack of desire, excuse me, to eat, or maybe you're overeating because it's, your stress coping mechanism, right? So these are just going to be shifts from what's normal to you. Same with sleep patterns. Okay. Some people are perfectly okay with getting 6 hours of sleep. Some people are perfectly okay with getting 12 hours of sleep. But if you are one of those people who gets, 6 hours of sleep, but you find yourself sleeping for 12 hours, okay, or vice versa, that's a change in your sleep pattern. Okay. Whatever change occurs is different from what you're used to. Maybe you're having a difficult time concentrating. You're getting sick more often. Okay. And you're more irritable, frustrated, or angry towards others than what you are normally or what you're comfortable with. Okay. So if at any time you feel overwhelmed, please talk to someone. Okay. And if you think about hurting yourself or suicide, there are resources. One, of course, is you can call or text 988 to reach a suicide crisis line. And I know a lot of times people hear that word and they kind of cringe or bristle a little bit. But I used to work those lifelines. I used to work those hotlines. And everyone on those calls are trained, they're compassionate, and a lot of them have lived experience as well. So they know where you're coming from. So I don't want anyone to feel like, well, that's not for me. Sure it is, right? If you want to reach out and talk to somebody, what that call does, it kind of gives you a buffer of time between your or between the thought and the action. Okay, so if you need to call somebody, please do. And if your burnout causes resentment towards the person that you're caring for, or you feel like you might hurt that person, you also need to reach out for help. And I'll give you resources at the end. Okay, you can contact a friend or a family member, a social worker, a mental health professional. Okay, there's always somebody that you can reach out to to get the assistance and the support that you need, okay? So what does caregiver burnout feel like? And this one I think can be kind of tricky because so often caregivers disregard their feelings. They put them on the back burner. They're so focused on the other person that sometimes they might not even notice how they're feeling. And then all of a sudden, they come crash, they crash and burn, right? So everyone's experience with burnout is going to be different. But these are some of the similar reports that we hear from other caregivers, okay? So anxiety or fear, that could be worried about if you do something wrong, it's going to harm somebody that you care about, right? Oh, I'm so tired, I can't concentrate. I mixed up mom's medication, or what if I can't hold them when they need to use the restroom because I'm so tired? I have a lot of anxiety or fear about carrying out the tasks of my loved one that my loved one needs. Anger or frustration. So we're not saying that anger or frustration are necessarily automatically saying I'm burnt out, but these are kind of like consistent feelings that we feel. Especially like if the person within your care doesn't want your help or doesn't accept your help or doesn't appreciate the help that you're providing, that can definitely exacerbate those feelings, right? You might experience denial. Okay, so maybe you are denying the severity of your loved one's condition, or you're saying it isn't that bad. Okay, denial can show up as a protective factor. If we think that it's not as big of a deal, then maybe we don't feel the pressure to perform, right? Guilt. So spending time taking care of yourself is less important than the person within your care, right? So you might feel bad for doing things to care for yourself because they only benefit you and not somebody else. Okay. A lot of you kind of have this personality trait, right? Like, well, I'll be okay. Let somebody else have that, right? And that in and of itself isn't bad. But when you allow guilt to dictate your rest, you're going to be more prone to burnout, right? Because if you have to earn your rest, or you feel like you could just push through, you're just kind of accelerating that path towards burnout. Maybe you're feeling a lot of negativity, right? So maybe it started out pretty positively, but now it kind of feels like this dark cloud is following you around. So your feelings towards your responsibility, maybe they're passive, or you don't really have a desire to do your job well anymore, right? Just kind of like, again, that hopeless or that helpless feeling of like, what's the point, right? And then feeling secluded or alone. So you feel like you don't have support or nobody wants to help or they stop asking for help because they feel like it's a sign of weakness, right? I signed up for this. I'm the caregiver. This is my job. I shouldn't ask other people for help, okay? And it's normal to feel these feelings when you're burned out, okay? Again, that's kind of where that hopelessness kind of or helplessness kind of creeps in a little bit too, right? It's important not to act on those feelings in a way that could hurt yourself or someone else. Okay. So again, reach out for support if you notice these feelings. So what causes caregiver burnout? Okay. It is a profound challenge that many experience when they pour the majority of their time, energy, and resources into caring for another person. And this is often at the expense of their own well-being, right? Of course, it's completely understandable that when you focus so much on the needs of those you love, your own physical, emotional, and mental health can take a backseat, right? And that's okay. That's appropriate sometimes, right? If, you need to help someone to the toilet, you can't say, well, this is my me time. You're just going to have to deal with it, right? We all know there are times where, time is of the essence and you have to get up and do something immediately, okay? But if you're doing it consistently over and over and over again, you're always denying your needs, that's going to cause burnout, okay? This is self-neglect, and it can deeply affect not only how you feel, but also your ability to manage your responsibilities, okay? And several factors can contribute to this overwhelming sense of burnout. One, role confusion. So this is where you step into the caregiver role and it kind of feels sudden and confusing. I think about people who maybe their loved one had like a stroke or were in an accident or something suddenly and unexpected happened. and they're just kind of thrown into this role of caregiving, like literally overnight, right? And so it's not uncommon to struggle with separating these new responsibilities from your identity as a spouse or a child or a friend or, any other loved one, right? So when multiple family members are involved in caregiving, this confusion can lead to heightened stress for everyone. Okay, so it's kind of like, well, maybe you have a group of siblings who are going to be involved in mom or dad's care, but nobody's defined the roles of that care. And then that confusion can lead to overperforming or someone underperforming, and then you getting the brunt of the work. And then that can be very confusing, and that leads to a lot of stress. Okay. And this kind of bleeds into the next one, varied expectations, right? Many of you start with the hope that your efforts are going to improve the health and happiness of the person that you're caring for. But the reality can be quite different, right? Caregiving can be really, really rewarding, but it can be also very overwhelming and challenging. And so balancing mixed feelings is something that many caregivers feel find very, very difficult. The lack of control. A lot of people who are caregiving have a lot of responsibility, but don't have a lot of authority. Okay. Lack of control can leave you feeling frustrated or even like limited by the supports you do have, whether that's financial resources, skills to manage care effectively, or even just the support system around you. So it's natural to feel weighed down by these challenges that come with that responsibility. Speaking of responsibilities, having too many can lead to caregiver burnout, right? It can kind of feel like you're just juggling all these different obligations at once. And so it's not uncommon to take on the role as if it were your sole responsibility, even when it feels like too much for one person to handle. And sometimes family dynamics can add extra pressure that intensifies the stress, right? Maybe there's conflict on how the care is supposed to go, and that adds additional stress. And then finally, not recognizing burnout can cause burnout, right? If you don't realize that you're getting close to that edge, that you need to take a step back or you need to delegate tasks, right? If you're not acknowledging the fact that you're overwhelmed, that can lead to burnout, right? Many caregivers don't immediately recognize the signs of burnout, which is why I wanted to do this presentation, because many of you might just thinking, well, I'm just tired. I just need to take a nap. And you're waking up tired even if you've had 10 hours of sleep, right? And so you're not realizing that that's your body signaling, your nervous system signaling that I'm out of balance, right? I need more than just one day off. Okay. And of course, not recognizing that you're in this space, that can make providing care very, very challenging for both you and your loved one. Okay. And I want you to remember, it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's kind of part of the job, right? But when we acknowledge these feelings, that's our first step that we're taking towards finding balance and support. Okay. If we just keep sweeping it under the rug and saying, I'm okay, when we're not going to be able to get the help and the resources that we need. Okay. So we need to prioritize our well-being. And I know that sounds, a little uncomfortable for some people, but that's the reality of it. Okay. We have to maintain the axis upon which all other things are circling, right? If you're the one that's taking care of everything and then you're out of commission, what happens? We know what happens, right? We can't let that happen. So we have to take care of ourselves. So what is the long-term impact of caregiver burnout? Okay, some of you have been caregiving for 6 months. Some of you have been caregiving for 6 years. Some of you have been caregiving for, 16 years, right? Long-term caregiving, you're bound to bump up against burnout, if not completely fall into it, okay? And burnout can take a while to recover from. So it's more important for us to recognize the signs and take a step back from the edge when we feel like we're getting close than it is to keep pushing forward and falling into that chasm of burnout, because then we're going to have to take even more time to get ourselves back to feeling normal again, okay? It's easy to feel overwhelmed and vulnerable to physical and mental health challenges in a long, dedicated period of caregiving. Okay. So maybe you're putting off routine checkups delaying necessary treatment, right? Maybe you have a chronic condition, or maybe you have a surgery that needs to be done, but because of your caregiving, you can't prioritize that, or you feel like you can't prioritize that. And so again, you're putting your well-being, your physical, emotional, mental health to the side. And over time, to do that consistently, that leads to long-term impacts, okay, that are going to be more difficult to overcome. So it's of course important to recognize that if mental health symptoms like depression or anxiety are left unaddressed, both your quality of life and the quality of life of your loved one are going to suffer, okay? Your loved one thrives when you take care of yourself. So it's vital to prioritize your own well-being, right? If you're burnt out, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling resentful, if you're feeling depressed, do you think you're really going to be kind and loving and patient and compassionate to the capacity that you would like to be with your loved one? Probably not. Okay. Probably not. And if you found a trick to doing that, please let me know. Okay. And of course, in extreme cases, the stress and depression that come with caregiving burnout can be seriously threatening, right? So please remember, seeking support is not a sign of weakness, okay? It takes a lot of guts to tell somebody you're struggling, okay? And that is a very essential step towards ensuring that both you and your loved one can enjoy a healthier and happier life together, okay? So an assessment. If you feel burned out, you may choose to talk with your doctor about this or a mental health professional, and see what your options are, okay? A comprehensive assessment should include evaluating your mental health, your physical health, any type of symptoms that maybe have creeped up that are, new and kind of different. And it's important to be open and honest with your provider, okay? If you underplay or deny what's going on with you, they're not going to be able to help you in the way that you need help, okay? Too often we go to the doctor and they say, "How are you feeling?" And we say, "Fine." And fine can mean all kinds of things, but it very rarely means fine, okay? So please be honest with your healthcare provider. I'm willing to bet money that anything you tell them, they've probably heard before, okay? And they won't be surprised. If you've been taking care of somebody long term, and the needs are getting more and more overwhelming, and you say, "Hey, I'm feeling a little depressed about this," they're going to say, "Yeah, that makes sense," right? They're not going to say, "What's wrong with you? Why are you feeling this way? Why don't you just suck it up?" Okay. Doctor's not going to respond to you that way. And if they do, please report them. Okay. So don't be ashamed or embarrassed or feel like, you should be okay. Because if you're not, then you're not. And that's okay. All right. So how do we treat caregiver burnout? Okay. I want you guys to understand that caregiver burnout is a physiological event that happens in your body. Okay. It is the result of long-term neglect of your body, your nervous system, your emotions. Okay. So this isn't just something that's in your head. Okay. This is an actual biological, physiological thing that happens. Okay. So because of that, there are ways that you can treat this. Okay. You'll likely need to try more than one strategy to feel well again. And so I'm going to give you a few tips. One, again, talk to your healthcare provider, okay? The amount of stress and emotional weight that comes with being a caregiver can feel overwhelming, okay? And so it helps to reach out to somebody who has the skill set to help address that, okay? You may have a care team, right, that is helping you care for your loved one. And make sure you let them know what's going on, right? Give them an up-to-date analysis of how you're feeling, how it's impacting your health, and what they can do to help support you while you heal, okay? Make time for self-care. So we hear the word self-care, and sometimes we think of things like, a bubble bath or a decadent dessert or something like that. And those are not wrong. Obviously, I will always advocate for our life's little indulgences. But self-care is really more of like a shift in the way that you're caring for yourself overall, okay? And it's not selfish to take care of yourself while you're taking care of somebody else, okay? So we don't skip personal appointments like going to the dentist, going to the doctor, okay? Make sure you're eating well throughout the day and getting enough sleep. This is just maintaining the motor of you, okay? We don't put chocolate pudding in our car and expect it to drive down the street, right? We have to give it the right fuel. Our bodies are no different, okay? And sleep is exponentially more important, I think, than any other tip I can give you. And I know some of you are caring for loved ones who are up and down all hours of the night, and so sleep can be very difficult for you. So I would definitely talk with their provider and say, so and so's not sleeping. How can we help them sleep so that I can get more sleep? Okay, there's always an avenue that you can inquire down. But when we sleep, we actually kind of flush our brains and kind of help with that brain fog that we feel. It's how we solidify memory and things like that. So sleep is not something that we can skip long term. Okay, so we need to make sure we're prioritizing sleep. Exercise can improve your mood and can unwind and help you unwind at the end of each day. And you don't have to do big, crazy exercises. You can just do simple stretching, maybe walking a treadmill or walking around your neighborhood. We're not asking you to go out and be, Hulk Hogan or what have you, okay? Just some movement is always good for the mind and the body. And you can even do things like meditation or yoga to kind of help you wind down and de-stress, okay? Next, ask for help. We know it's not easy to ask, and sometimes it's more difficult to accept the help, okay? And sometimes your support system doesn't recognize the need you have unless you ask for it, okay? How many of you go through your day with a smile on your face? I'm okay, I've got this, I'm fine, but internally you're on fire, right? And when someone says, hey, do you need some help? No, I'll be good. When inside you're like, absolutely, I need help, but I feel bad for accepting it. Okay. So you might need to practice saying yes when someone offers instead of saying no. Okay. Oftentimes, others will be more than willing to help you pick up groceries if they're out, right? Or running errands if they're already out around town, walking your dog, right? Just little things. If someone says, how can I help? I don't know about you all, but I don't offer help I'm not willing to give. Okay. So we always have to assume that if they're offering, they're willing. Okay. So saying yes is okay. And then find local resources, right? Alabama Lifespan Respite, we have a respite reimbursement program that is designed specifically to help you get a break to treat your stress, okay? There's a lot of local community agencies that offer respite for free or low cost. There's actually a database on our website. If you go on there, alabamarespite.org, there is a database of community-based respite programs, and they're labeled or they're sorted by county. Okay. So you can find in-home healthcare, adult daycare centers, community meal programs. I encourage all of you to contact your local area agency on aging. They have a ton of resources that can be useful for you if you have an elderly person you're caring for. Okay. And of course, your healthcare provider, they're a great first resource point to kind of guide you, point in the right direction, right? What's available? What can I do? Do you know of any agencies, right? And then there's support groups, of course, that can connect you with other people who share a similar lifestyle as you, and they know what you're going through. They've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? And community can go a huge our community can take us a lot further than we think, right? When we think about isolation and stress and overwhelm, being around people who understand that, it alleviates a lot of stress just being in that space and having those conversations, okay? Alabama Lifespan Respite hosts a monthly caregiver support group online, so anyone across the state can participate, and it's held on the third Monday at 10 a.m. You can sign up for it on our website, on our Facebook, on our Instagram, and also through our newsletter, okay? And if you don't have access to any of those things, you can always email or call me and I will set you up, okay? So you can participate. Okay, so can we prevent caregiver burnout? Absolutely. Okay, that's the whole point of this presentation, is not only to show you what it is, but to let you know this can be prevented if we are intentional about our self-care practices. okay, and receiving help. So find someone you trust. It helps to talk about your feelings and frustrations with someone else, whether that's a friend, family member, mental health professional, social worker, okay? And local organizations, they might host support groups, like I just mentioned. A lot of our senior centers have support groups for caregivers. Some of them may be caregiving in general. Some of them are, caring for adult children with disabilities or, minor children with disabilities, people who have dementia, people who have Parkinson's, right? They can be broad or they can be very specialized. Okay, so it never hurts to look around and see what's available to you when it comes to support and community. Setting realistic goals. Okay, so it's important to accept that you may need assistance with caregiving, especially if you're trying to balance other responsibilities like work and family. Okay, many of you may be part of the sandwich generation where you're raising children and caring for elderly adults in your home. And so it feels like you never catch a break, right? When can I even do self-care if everybody needs me all the time, right? So setting realistic goals can really help kind of cut the sting out of that a little bit, right? Um, you may not be able to assume all of the responsibilities needed, okay? So you might have to have somebody come in and help you with some of those tasks, okay? You might be able to do the lion's share, but there may be tiny little things that kind of chip away at your energy that you can delegate, okay? Um, Something even as simple as doing auto pay on your bills if you can, because that's alleviating some of that mental load that you have to carry around all day, right? Again, if your workload gets overwhelming, reach out for help. Okay. Set a routine, know your limits, and be honest with yourself about your situation, right? Maybe you are caring for someone whose mobility is not what it was in the beginning, right? So now you have to do a lot of lifting, a lot of turning, a lot of carrying, a lot of, diapering and changing. That's just physically difficult for you to do, okay? Assess the situation, be realistic, see if there's some way that you can have help in those scenarios, okay? And recognize and assess your risk for burnout, okay? Learn more, right? You may feel more comfortable providing care when you have the knowledge and understanding of the condition or the illness that your loved one is experiencing, right? Being realistic about your loved one's condition, especially if it's progressive like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, okay? And acknowledge that there may come a time where they require nursing services or assisted living outside of the family home. And this is a tricky one because a lot of people feel like, well, if I have somebody else come in, I'm abandoning my duties, or if I have, my loved one move into another level of care, like full-time facility or nursing home, I've abandoned them, okay? And that's not true. All right. Everyone's going to have their own threshold of when it's too much. Okay. So your too much might not look like, Jane from down the street's too much. Okay. So we don't want to compare. We just want to be aware of what we're actually experiencing, what we're actually feeling, and what we are actually capable of doing. Okay. And so learning about our loved one's condition allows us to kind of pre-plan. Okay. I know I can do this now, but 5 years from now, I might not be able to because their needs are going to change. Right. And that's totally okay. Okay. There's a reason why these places exist. Okay. Because the care of your loved one may become too much for one person at some point. And that's not an indicator that you've failed them. That's just the nature of time. Okay. And the result of your loved one's diagnosis. Okay. Next, take care of yourself. Okay. Again, you're taking care of someone else, make sure your needs are met first. It's that same concept we hear about airlines, right? Put your oxygen mask on before we help others. We've said it ad nauseum, almost to the point we've kind of desensitized ourselves to the wisdom in that analogy, right? Even if it's just an hour or two, try to set aside some time for yourself, okay? It's not a luxury, it is a necessity for caregivers. Okay. Some of you will have your whole arm cut off and bleeding, and you're like, oh, it's fine. I'm going to go ahead and make something for dinner while you're, bleeding out in the kitchen, right? Maybe not that extreme, but, might as well be, right? You are in an emergency situation internally, but you're shoving it down so that you can care for another person. And That might be okay every so often, but every day, all day is going to lead you to burnout, okay? We can also prevent burnout by accepting our feelings, okay? We are allowed to have uncomfortable feelings about things or quote unquote negative, right? Frustration, anger, resentment, okay? These are feelings we don't like to admit that we have, but they're real. And you can love your person to death and know that they are not responsible for what's going on. It is just what it is. And you can still feel resentment and anger and fear and frustration. Okay. You feel those feelings. It doesn't mean you're blaming somebody. It just means you're a human being and what you're doing is hard and you need some time to yourself. Okay. So if your feelings are overwhelming, again, reach out for help. Okay. So I want to talk briefly about burnout versus compassion fatigue. Okay. You can experience both of these as a caregiver. Okay. And so I want to explain to you what they are. So caregiver burnout is that feeling, again, of deep exhaustion and stress after caring for another person. And compassion fatigue occurs when you take on the emotional stress and trauma of the person in your care. Okay. And this can cause a lack of empathy. Okay. And empathy is where you understand the feelings and situations of someone else. Okay. And it can also manifest as a lack of care for the person that you're supposed to be caring for. Okay. Compassion fatigue is exactly what it sounds like. You are tired of caring. You ever felt like that before? I love you, mom, but I really don't care. Right? And that's hard to say that you felt that way before, to admit that you've been there before, right? But it's true. If you think of compassion as a muscle, and if you're constantly working that muscle and overworking it, guess what? You're gonna reach failure at some point. The muscle's gonna give out. Okay. This is what happens when we let it go too long and we don't stop and assess and seek support. We get to this space of where we are just tired of caring and we can't anymore. And then apathy starts to creep in. Okay. And apathy is that idea that, you don't care anymore, right? You have no feelings, you're kind of numb, right? And it happens. It happens more often than we like to admit. Okay. And so compassion fatigue and caregiver burnout can happen at the same time, right? Lucky us. Okay. But the more aware we are of our own bodies and more aware of how we handle stress, the more equipped we are to address caregiver burnout before it gets out of control. Okay. So getting help. If you experience severe stress and depression, please seek professional attention. Okay. Stress and depression are treatable conditions, but they can get worse when you have caregiver burnout. Okay. Especially if you're already somebody who's prone to being chronically anxious, having a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry. If you're prone to low mood, melancholy, depression, caregiver burnout will make those seem so much bigger. Okay. It'll inflate them so much more. Okay. So we have to be mindful of that. So we can reach out, again, home health services. Okay. Some of them are more affordable than others. Some of them are covered through insurance. Some of them can be covered through waiver programs. Some of them can be just community offerings. Okay. So look and see what your options are. Don't just assume there's nothing that you can do. Okay. And some agencies provide short-term respite care. A lot of people don't realize this, but hospice is not just for people who are actively dying. Okay. You can contact a hospice and see if your insurance will cover short-term respite stays or care through hospice. And a lot of them offer nurses, medication management, a social worker. Some of them even have chaplains on staff that can come and give you spiritual support. Okay. Next, adult daycare. These are programs that offer a place for adults over the age of 65 to socialize, to engage in different activities with their peers. Some of them provide medical care. Some of them provide meals while your loved one is there. And I think sometimes we forget, our loved ones might want a change of pace as well. Maybe they want to get around new people and see new faces, right? They may argue with you and dig their heels in, but more often than not, once they get in there and see what it's all about, they're excited to go the next time, okay? Private care aides, okay? So these are people who are professional and they specialize in assisting the needs and coordinating care and services. There's some locally here to Huntsville. I'm not sure about the rest of the state, but you can hire these agencies to come in and they're trained and they have knowledge and they understand what needs to be done. Of course, you're going to have to give them, the breakdown of how you do things and what you want them to do. But generally, they have a good set of skills that can be useful, especially if your loved one has like high support needs, medical needs, things like that. Okay. And then again, I'll plug the Area Agency of Aging. You can contact them or your local chapter of the AARP for services. And some of these organizations, some national organizations, if you just look them up, they have what they call warm lines where you can call somebody and just talk about what's going on. Okay. Sometimes we forget the power of conversation. Okay. And also, I'm available for what we call care chats. So if you're not looking for, maybe mental health support, you're not looking for a support group, you're not looking for anything social, you just need somebody to validate you, and hear what you're going through for, 30 minutes or so, that can go a long way, just kind of getting you through that sticky spot in your day. And also, I've added this QR code here. So if you have a smartphone, if you open up your camera app and focus on the QR code, it'll take you to a referral sheet, a digital form that you can fill out for free mental health services through Alabama Lifespan Respite. So I'm a licensed therapist on staff, and I'm also a social worker. And so if you are interested in getting some mental health services, fill out that form and we'll get to you. And if you think your loved one might need some mental health supports, there's another staff member named Kendra, and she can see your loved one. And again, these are services that are free to the community, okay? So that's my info for you today. I hope you found it useful. Here is my email address and my phone number. So if you want to reach out about this specific topic of burnout or for any of the other things that I mentioned, mental health services, care chats, or even just help navigating our website, please let me know. Please reach out. And if you're not currently on our respite reimbursement program, I can also help get you set up for that. There is no income-based requirement. The only requirements we have is you have to be a full-time unpaid family caregiver caring for someone who has an official diagnosis of a chronic illness or disability, and you have to be a resident of the state of Alabama. And what would disqualify you would be if you're currently receiving respite-specific waivers from another program like the VA or Medicaid, Medicare, okay?